Good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events this evening. And tonight, we are very proud and honored to have our friend Jeffery Deaver here for the launch of his brand new Colter Shaw book, The Final Twist. And we have a nice batch of autographed copies. Jeff was kind enough to sign a bunch for us, and they're on the way right now. So I'll go ahead and put a link in the comments field if you'd like to order one before they're all gone. And Barbara's holding up a copy right there. And by the way, I will be monitoring the comments field. So if you have questions for Jeff, go ahead and don't be shy, type them in, and I'll reappear towards the end of the program to ask some of your questions. So Barbara, I will turn it over to you for the moment.
Thank you, Patrick. Jeffrey, how lovely to see you. A salute to you on the actually the night before the publication of your new book, The Final Twist.
Well, Barbara, Patrick, everyone, all my friends at Poison Pen, I cannot think of a more delightful venue to launch my book at. This is the worldwide, we could call it the red carpet debut of The Final Twist. So cheers to you all.
Thank you so much. Now, I have to say that in reviewing for tonight's conversation, I took a look at the published list of Jeffrey's works, and it's truly terrifying. I mean, this is a man, I can give him a decade, but he is truly so productive. I hope you live as long as I do, because then this thing may double, kid. But in any case, he's written 5 series, of which Lincoln Rhyme has 14. And I read today, Jeffrey, that you have signed a new contract for a new Lincoln Rhyme and a new Colter Shaw.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we'll have at least 15 Lincoln Rhyme.
Well, actually, Barbara, because 16? I love twists and turns and surprises. So I don't think it's technically been announced yet, but I have the 15th Lincoln Rhyme will be published this year. And the 16th will be out in next year or the year after that. And why is that? No, not because I'm particularly prolific, but because I've had nothing to do for the last 14 or 15 months except sit on my butt and write books and short stories and so forth. And I figured rather than watch, Curb Your Enthusiasm or Veep reruns over and over and over again, I'd try to put that time to some good use. So the 15th Lincoln Rhyme will be out in November, called The Midnight Lock, and then a Colter Shaw and a Lincoln Rhyme after that. But now I'm launching The Final Twist, my third Colter Shaw now.
This is really exciting. That means I get to see Jeffrey again this year, and very possibly I get to see Jeffrey in person, which leads us to, we might be able to go out to dinner and actually drink together, Jeffrey, as we have for 2 decades, I think, at least.
Oh, at least 2 decades.
That is really wonderful news. I'm always cheered when I see that a writer has signed a contract for new books.
Well, Barbara, I will say that I've been vaccinated, and I have. I was planning a virtual event, a benefit for a library in October, but they have decided, and I'm keynoting that, and we have all mutually decided that we're going live with it. And we'll be smart, we'll be social distanced and clever and probably wear masks to a point, but it's going to be a live event. And so Virginia Beach, and that is sometime in October, I don't remember exactly when, and Poison Pen, Scottsdale in November, I certainly hope.
Well, so do I. How wonderful. Now, to complete this catalog, Jeffrey has also written some astounding number of standalones, of which I remember Carte Blanche, because we did a wonderful event for his James Bond novel, in which, actually, do you remember the Scottsdale Community College created a whole film for us based on snippets from all the James Bond movies?
It was a professional job. They did an incredible thing with that, and I still remember that very memorable event.
It was fabulous. Also, Jeffrey just spews out short stories. I mean, for a man who plots out his thrillers meticulously to the despair of most of us, he also just, as I said, spews out short stories. So he's in anthologies and collections and lots of stories. And I don't even remember a year passing where Jeffrey has not been up for an award for one of his short stories. But his most recent award, which I think probably means a lot to him and the whole community, is that he was the Mystery Writers of America Grand Master. So I didn't get to congratulate you on that, so I'll do it now.
Well, thank you. What an honor that was. And I looked at the list of past Grand Masters a few people you and your viewers may have heard of: Agatha Christie, Ed McBain, Mickey Spillane, John D. McDonald, Jean McCarran. The list goes on and on. And I was, do you know that story about Groucho Marx, who said he wouldn't join a club that would have him as a member? And I kept thinking, I do not deserve this, but of course I accepted it, and it is one of the true honors of my lifetime.
Of course you deserve it. Don't be ridiculous. You're one of the more decorated heroes of this genre. And, and you've served in all kinds of ways, both the international thriller writers and the mystery writers of America, in an executive capacity, as well as an author. And that's important, that you support your professional associations. So good for you. Anyway, let us talk about the final twist. Now, the first thing I want to say is the final twist. Could you find a better title for a Jeffery Deaver novel? I mean, there's so much irony in it. Did you pick out this title?
It was a combination between myself and Mark Giovanni, my wonderful editor, and he was inspired in the first place. And then I was coincidentally binging on the House of Cards, the British version. The American one, frankly, I didn't care for too much. It was a bit bloated, but the Ian Richardson House of Cards, oh, it was just perfect. It was a trilogy, as the Colter Shaw, the Echo Ridge, the opening shot of Colter Shaw. I will be continuing to write the books, but I wanted an introductory, a Genesis trilogy, and the trilogy of the House of Cards ended with the final cut. And so we thought the final twist was absolutely perfect. And not only that, but the final cut in the British series deals with politics and corporate shenanigans, and that is really the backbone of the book, about which I can speak a little bit. But the title does kind of give it away: twist, twist, twist. A lot of twists in the book, and including one that occurs, a very significant one in the last paragraph of the book. So. I think if I'm known for anything, it will be my surprises and twists and turns. So I thought this was a quite appropriate title.
You really do have an ingenious mind for it. And let me go back, because I'm trying to remember the exact title of it. But your book that you wrote backwards.
The October List.
The October List. I thought, I can't imagine how exhausting it must have been to do that. But it was, I think, an incredible feat of metafiction. And it was just like clockwork. It came out absolutely perfectly. There was no way to fault you for that one.
Well, thank you. It took me 10 years I've always wanted to do it. And I have to give a shout out to my wonderful sister, Julie Reese Deaver, a young adult writer who I believe is watching right now. And one of our guilty pleasures is watching Seinfeld. And so what was perhaps the best Seinfeld episode, I believe it was called, I can't recall the name now, but it went backwards over the course of about a week. Now, Time's Arrow, Martin Amis has done that as well. Merrily We Roll Along by Stephen Sondheim has that same conceit. Well, I wanted to do it not in a comedic or dramatic sense, but I wanted to do it in a crime world. So very, very briefly, we open Sunday night. First page is chapter 36. Next chapter is 35, going down to chapter 1. And I did that because I wanted to write a book with a surprise beginning, because all of my books have surprise endings, but this book has a surprise beginning. And it's the Daily Standard said of the book, this is a work of true genius and one which he must never, ever do again.
Well, I can see, because it actually, in some ways, is an exhausting book to read, because you as the reader are so tense, wondering if he's really going to be able to do this and take you from the surprise beginning to the end.
Well, and to be honest with you, Barbara, I wasn't quite sure I was going to be able to pull it off either, but generally the notices were pretty good. But it's interesting you put that in the context of the final twist, because when I envisioned the trilogy, which begins with The Never Game, that's the first Colter Shaw book, The Goodbye Man is the second, and the final twist is the third, I originally had a very lengthy book in mind that began with the story of the Never Game, then cut forward in time to the final twist, and then cut back in time to The Goodbye Man. It was going to be one continuous story of about 1,300 pages, which publishers don't really like unless you're writing, a Stephen King kind of novel or something like that. Or Diana's books, of course, are quite lengthy, her wonderful work. But then we decided mutually that it was probably better to do 3 books, but they take place one right after another. The Goodbye Man begins about 8 hours after the Never Game ends, and the final twist begins about 7 hours after the Goodbye Man ends. And that again this is the genesis of Colter Shaw and his family and who he is and what he does. Introduces the whole I found it a very compelling and fascinating upbringing for Colter, and we can chat about him a little bit in a minute, but also reveals not only what he does, each book has a present time mystery that he has to unravel, in addition to this overarching story of what happened to his father. And I love in the final twist how it all comes together. Those secrets from the past, his father's death, the present reward assignment he's on, and in the last, I don't know, few pages, everything just comes together over 3 books.
It's really true. We're doing another one of these, but maybe when we're talking in November, we should think about this. We've done a couple of follow-up book discussion clubs for books where we really wanted to talk about the entire book, but we couldn't do it at the book launch because of all the spoilers.
Sure.
Maybe we should think about that, because it would be really interesting to be able to discuss this book in its entirety, but we can't without, making people furious and possibly getting hits drawn upon ourselves. So let's not do that. I do think that the family story is terrific. And I think it's more meaningful, having read the first 2, that the way this book draws us more into the family and reveals various things has much more impact after you've already published the first 2 and given us that, than if you'd started out, with this as the story.
Barbara, I've kind of changed, and if we like, I can chat a little bit about the craft of writing if we have time for that. I don't know what our timetable's like, but one of the things I did want to mention is that I've been known up until now as a very plot-driven author, and my plots are very fast-paced. All the books take place over about 24 hours, maybe 48 hours. There's a lot of there are subplots that weave in and out. We come down to the end, and each of those plots has a big twist and turn. And to me, characters, although I tried to develop living, breathing characters, they came after the plot. The plot always excited me. Then I heard, I believe it was on NPR. This is a few years ago. A neuroscientist was mentioning that the part of our brain that responds to the people we know in real life, that give us emotional reactions to our friends, our partners, our spouses, and our enemies, the boss at work we don't like, or the fellow who cuts us off on the highway. That part of the brain is identical to the part of the brain that allows us to respond to characters. And that was like a revelation, characters in fiction. And that was a revelation to me. And it said, well, I'm never going to neglect my plots, but I am absolutely going to spend more time developing characters, even if a certain subplot of that character does not impact directly the main plot of the book. And Colter Shaw is the first example of that, because he has a family that we will revisit over and over and over again. Each of his siblings has 2 siblings, an older brother and a younger sister, have fascinating careers on their own. Their mother is basically a mountain woman who lives in the hills of the Sierra Nevada, totes around a 45, and nobody's going to mess with Mary Dove under any circumstances. So I created this world of characters that I like, I know readers like, and it was a kind of a revelation for me that let's get these people up and running in the plot, but like them just as much as the story.
But that speaks so well for you as an author, that you don't just phone one in, but you're constantly, you've always been really interested in craft, and you're a great teacher. I know that you've taught loads of writers and workshops and so forth. But I think it's wonderful that you're always pushing yourself and, thinking about new things to do to keep yourself. How long is your attention span?
Oh, do you know the shiny penny syndrome? Where you're walking down the street and you glance down and there's a shiny penny and you say, a penny. It's right next to a parking meter. Parking meter, that reminds me of my car. I've got to get the oil change in my car. Wait, the car, did I leave those bakery goods in the car? Bakery goods, that reminds me I've got to go to the store. Now you would think that would be not much of an advantage for a writer who does need to focus. But what I found is that it gives me, the way my mind works, I get ideas. I have a file on the same computer I'm talking to you on right now, and your wonderful viewers. And I have a file called ideas, and I have literally 50 novel ideas. I have probably 60 short story ideas. I will not get to all of those in my lifetime, but the one thing about my mind is that it jumps around to these ideas. But now, when I sit down to write a book, I force myself to concentrate on what I'm writing. And that's where, as we've talked many times, and I think some of your viewers have heard me before, why I think an outline is so important. And that when my mind jumps around, out come the ideas, I shuffle them around, finally I get an outline I like. And that's when I sit down, I strap myself in the chair, not literally, I will add, but then I look at scene 47 and concentrate on that and write that. And while I'm doing that, I mean, things come to mind, of course, and I may get an idea, chapter 32, this reminds me I should do something there. So I'm known for being a bit scattered, but I try to use that to my advantage.
Well, I mean, but it's interesting that that you don't let yourself get bored, and therefore you don't bore us. And you described, I mean, you and I have talked forever about not only are you an outliner, but you are a revisionist. And I don't know how many times I have told the story of the night somebody asked you how long you would keep, or how long they would let you keep revising. And you announced that if they would let you, you would hang by your heels on a trapeze over the printing press while it was going, and you would revise, which I've always thought was perfect. So, I guess the question is then, where do characters come into this scenario? And, when you're laying out your plots so meticulously, and when you go back and revise, how much of your attention and space are the characters taking compared to the way it used to be?
Sure, I would say it's now about 50-50. Now, when I do the outline, I will come up with a plot, and very briefly, the final twist is about a Colter Shaw going to San Francisco, following a clue that goes back a decade or so about individuals, a nefarious group of corporate operators who probably were responsible for his father's death. So he's an investigator, he's a private eye. And at the same time, he is pursuing a reward, and that's his business. A mother has posted a reward for a young woman who's gone missing, her daughter, and Colter Shaw cannot resist trying to save her from the sometimes not so savory streets of San Francisco. So those stories, lots of twists and turns, surprises, huge surprise, 7/8 of the way through, that I am hoping the press will pick up on, because it has to do with Washington corporate shenanigans, and it's kind of a mind blower. So I'm very excited about that. But while I was coming up with that, at the same time, I would conceive of the characters and write little bios of each of them, even the not a messenger kind of character, the walk-ons, but the characters who we met, who had dialogue and who played significant roles, maybe helping Colter, maybe in opposition to him. And that's something I generally had not done. Now, I will say I started that with the Never Game. That was my process there, because my whole concept was to blend rich, developed characters and the present day story, rich and developed to the point where I will actually have I write my books in past tense, But I generally, when I go into a flashback, I write that in the present tense to differentiate so readers are not confused. And it may sound a little confusing, but the general narrative of my books is third person past tense. But when I go to the present tense, when I do a flashback that could be 5 or 10 years earlier, that might be first person, who knows? But that has nothing to do with the story itself in the final twist, except what it does is tell us a little bit more about who this Colter Shaw character is, whom I want people to just absolutely fall in love with. He's a hero for our time.
He's a wonderful character, and I like the way he's pursuing both the truth of his family story and pursuing his business of seeking rewards and, taking the pay, whatever his percentage of the award is, or the whole award, and financing. And of course, he has people that help him with that, which it can't be a solo operation. But what I want to talk to you about is there is another character in this book in particular, which really was fun for me, and that is the city of San Francisco.
Oh.
You really take us on a tour of San Francisco. You give us a lot of history, both past and exploring it as it is today, because it is divided into specific communities. The geography of San Francisco lends itself to that, with the 7 hills and the whole bit. I mean, I went to college there, and the San Francisco that I greeted when I went to Stanford in 1958, by the time I left Stanford in 1963, after I finished graduate studies there, had completely changed, because we went from basically Eisenhower's America to the start of the beginning of the war and Haight-Ashbury and all the rest of it. And it was fascinating for me to have you take us through San Francisco. But one of the reasons you do that, and one of the mantras that Colter Shaw follows when he is investigating or doing anything, in fact, is to orient himself. His father had numerous truths that he would dictate to Colter.
Right.
I mean, maxims to live by, maxims to operate by. And one of them was, never be in a situation without orienting yourself. Always know where the windows and the exits and all the rest of it is. But on a broader scale, that also applies to where are you? Are you in the Tenderloin? Are you in Soma? Where are you in San Francisco? And I just love the fact that the city is an almost equal character to the people here. Did you, obviously you wrote this, well, did you write it during COVID, or did you finish this before COVID?
That's a good question. I have to say the last two. Well, first of all, thank you so much for that comment, Barbara, because that was very intentional. In the same way that I bring New York alive, I tried to in the Lincoln Rhyme books, I brought Colter Shaw, who's itinerant. He will probably be in Dubuque, Iowa at some point, but this was in San Francisco. I wanted San Francisco to come alive. But I will say I lived in San Francisco for a time, some years ago, after you had been there. But I find it
after I've been there, Jeffrey. Let's be real here.
Well, it was this was a long time ago. But I will say that when I was trying to be a folk musician out there and soaking up, doing a little writing at the time, but soaking up the atmosphere.
So you were at the Hungry Eye or the Purple Onion, or?
I never made it. No, I did the Coffee Gallery where Janis Joplin played. I did the I think it was called the Boarding House open mic. I was Hungry Eye. Those were the Hungry Eye tended to be more comedy, but there was also the psychedelic rock. I mean, Jimi Hendrix played out there. Of course the Jerry Garcia, but I was a single guitar strummer, and I busked on the streets as the character in the book does. And I have to say, I love music at the time more than anything else. I wanted to be a singer-songwriter, but you'll notice there are two components to that job description: singer and songwriter. Now, songwriting, I had done cold. I've written. I can write songs very quickly. My book that came out a few years ago, XO, as in Hugs and Kisses, I wrote an album of country western songs, and I did that in about over the course of a weekend. One of which was nominated for a Hollywood Music Award, as a matter of fact. And so I can do that. Somebody else sang that, I will say. So my career in San Francisco for among the audience who wanted a singer, probably more than they wanted a songwriter, it didn't go over very well. But I did walk around the city to all the districts, of course, the Haight. And that was in the heyday, and it was a tough city then. I mean, San Francisco had some really dark areas, and East Palo Alto, which is not far from your college, at one point was the most crime-ridden square, whatever it was, square X number of miles, than any other city in America. That has all changed now. I mean, obviously the redevelopment, gentrification, but a city that can go from there to the Nob Hill heights, the lofty heights, and have such a history, some good and some bad. I mean, the city does not have a particularly outstanding racial equality record. And Native Americans, tribal people have not been treated particularly well, not necessarily by San Francisco, but by the powers that be in California. And that's all part of the book, because I want that whole area to come alive, as well as look at the great cultural and law enforcement sacrifices that have been made by the individuals there. But aside from that, it's just a funky place. And I thought it would be just great for Colter to get himself into a whopping lot of trouble.
Well, it is a funky place, and the geographical constraints are part of the reason that
Mhm.
it's so unbelievably expensive to live there, why there is such a huge homeless population and no particular
Oh,
solution.
incredible, yes.
It's a city that can't expand well enough to embrace what Silicon Valley and so forth. My graduation party at Stanford was hosted by David Packer Jr., and none of us had any idea why they lived in this huge house and who the heck David Packer was. I mean, it was right on the cusp of all that. San Francisco was much more like Boston or Charleston when I first went there. It was very formal, it was small, it had, despite the earthquake and all the rest of it, there were families that were rooted there for decades, not centuries like Boston or Charleston, but anyway. And I mean, it's a very, you dressed up to do things. It's very white glove. I remember my mother was so upset that we ended up having tea at the palace and she was wearing tennis shoes and she thought, it's like a spotlight was on her feet and she was.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And, we got dressed up to go to the opera, the symphony. We would go up and down Bayshore, as students with other to do. So there were terrific cultural opportunities in San Francisco. It's always, had a wonderful musical background, for example, not just the Hungry Eye, where I went to hear the Kingston Trio, kiddo. That's
the Kingston Trio. Okay, well, I'm sure they did have those old folk groups.
Yeah, it was
Bonnie probably, and Limelighters, I'll bet.
Yeah, so reading about your San Francisco in this book, it was a real surprise. I have only been back a few times since I left California, and it made me aware how much the city has changed from the city that, that I first knew. And one of the things I found, and probably is generally true about aging, is that the things that stick with you are the things that you encountered when you were young. I think there's some wisdom that no matter how old you get, it's the music you heard as a teenager that sticks with you all your life.
I agree completely.
And I think that that's probably true of, encountering a city for the first time. I mean, my husband grew up on Park Avenue in New York, and New York today is not the New York that he remembers. And, San Francisco is not the city that I remember. And I think that's probably true especially for people who didn't stay there, who left and then have to look back at it.
I was there for about a year, and then I decided I wanted some luxuries in life, like food and water and shelter, because the music, busking for those of you who don't know, is opening your guitar case or violin case and putting it on the street, on the sidewalk, and playing, and then at the end of the day collecting enough for a meal that night. It's not the way to make a career. And by the way, music producers rarely walk around the streets of New York or San Francisco holding contracts in their hands saying, will you sign with ABC Records? That generally doesn't happen. But not unlike the book business, and you're a publisher too, a very renowned publisher, Barbara, where the of course in the old day you could submit a manuscript cold, no agent, no other than a letter of submission, just a self-addressed stamped envelope. You could possibly get published, but that rarely happens anymore nowadays.
Well, I really was so pleased and delighted with this revisit of San Francisco. I wanted to emphasize what a nice part of the book it is. But of course, for those of you who want to read thrillers, you want thrills, right? So we have, I think that Colter's family story is very rich in this book, and it will mean more to you if you have read the first two books than, it's not, you can't start here, but this is only the third book. I would really recommend taking a moment to read the first two, which are both available in paperback, and it will enhance your understanding of what's going on in Colter's family. But tell us a bit, for those who don't know these books, Jeffrey, tell us about, seeking rewards as a career, because it really is an unconventional career.
Sure. To back up just a little bit, Colter Shaw was the son of two renowned parents, professors at, I don't mention Berkeley, but it's Berkeley. It's referred to as Cal, I think, but it's University of California at Berkeley. And for various reasons that are clearly explained in the final twist. It's true, you don't have to read the first two, but it would be helpful. And I think they're good, exciting reads. And Disney has bought the Never Game for a TV series. So, and presumably that will, Justin Hartley, I think is planning on starring in it. Ken Olin from This Is Us and 30 Something, he's the producer and director behind it. So there'll be, COVID set everything back in Hollywood quite a bit. But anyway, it's a good, solid story, good streaming read and streaming TV thing as well. But just to back up a little bit about it, the Colter's father, Ashton, discovered something. And we don't quite know what in the first book, but he discovered something that brought the wrath of these corporate baddies down on him and possibly other officials. He fled to a compound in the Sierra Nevadas, and that's many miles, hundreds of miles from San Francisco. And he built basically a survival compound there. Survivalism. He taught his children survivalism, and which is something I don't know anything about. I researched it. Now, of course, survivalists fall into various categories. There are neo-Nazi survivalists. There are racist survivalists. There are wacko survivalists who believe the aliens from the planet Xantar are about to get us. But then there are also people who simply follow the Ralph Waldo Emerson approach and believe we should be self-sufficient and not rely too much on others. And that was basically Ashton's approach. He wanted the children to be safe. And in case these bad people came for him, which might or might not happen, he was a bit subject to paranoid schizophrenia. He did have an illness, but some of it was true, some of it wasn't. So he taught the children survival skills. Well, it turned out that Colter Shaw took to these skills, and he discovered that he was what he called a restless man. That was sort of his nickname within the family. And he tried to work in a law firm. And as we know, you and I know, law firms can be a bit static, let's put it that way. And so that didn't take. And while he was casting about for something to do, he was actually doing some logging in California. He heard about a young child who'd gone missing. There was a reward offered for that. And the police couldn't find this young child. And so he, using his physical skills, but also his power of deduction and his inability to stop on a quest, he will not refuse, and he will not stop until he gets to the answer. He found the child, who simply, it turned out, was up in the attic. He did not want to he had not prepared for a math test. So he took some potato chips and hid out in the attic. He was there for about 3 days. And Colter deduced that. And the reward was not much, maybe $1,000. But when the fellow handed it to him, the father handed it to him, he thought, I can make money doing this. And that was the start of his career. So now he travels around the country looking for rewards for missing people, escaped fugitives, suspects in crimes. And these, your viewers can take a look at it. They're offered. The biggest reward right now is about $23 million offered by the State Department for the identity of a terrorist or the location of a terrorist, maybe an ISIL fellow. I don't know what terrorist organization he's affiliated with. Those rewards Colter Shaw would not seek. Of course, he sticks to looking for missing persons and escaped convicts. But often he doesn't take the money at all. If there's a family of not much means, he will find maybe a missing child or an elderly person who's wandered off, deliver the person to the family, and they've scraped together. They've put a second mortgage on their home to offer a $5,000 reward. He says, pay me later, don't worry about it. And what's revealing about that is that he doesn't care about the money. In fact, it's revealed that he doesn't even need the money. What he likes about the reward is that it's a red flag. It's a pin in a problem that nobody else has been able to solve. Because if there's a reward, that means the parents can't find the missing child, the police can't or won't, and they often don't, or the police or the prison officials cannot, even though they've tried, find the suspect or the escaped prisoner. And Colter just rubs his hands together and says, that's what I need. In the same way that Lincoln Rhyme needs mental challenges, Colter Shaw needs the physical challenges. He's like a gunslinger of the modern era, Alan Ladd Jr. in Shane. He made no money helping Van Heflin, fight the Jack Palance and the bad guys, but he had to do that because that's who he was.
Well, actually, it's a knight on a quest. I mean, that's an old storytelling.
Isn't that a wonderful motif? I just absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And as you say, he's got skills from his survivalist upbringing and the maxims that his father taught him. He's got a logical mind, and legal training would help with that. And he's empathetic, which helps.
Barbara, can we do just a touch of show and tell here?
Of course.
I'm going to step away for just a moment.
I know there's a dog in the room, but maybe that's not what Jeffrey's going for.
No, not the dog. I do have my mama dog sitting next to me.
Okay.
Well, I love to do research in all my books. I spend months and months doing the outline, but also doing research. And so I thought, Colter Shaw is an ace repeller or abseiler. In fact, he and the children had to, quote, graduate from their father's survival school by abseiling or rappelling. It's an abseil if there's no surface. It's a rappel if you're kind of bouncing down the rocks. And so I actually bought rappelling gear.
Wow.
And now, one thing you have to understand about me is I have vertigo. I get quite dizzy, and I am afraid of heights. So I tried the rappelling gear, and it got mountain rope, and you put a little harness on, and it was basically 5 feet from the porch over the stairs, rappelling down. I could have walked, of course, but what I wanted to do was see how you actually feed the rope through the thing. And that was it. So I know my sister's listening now, and she'd say, Jeffrey, I hope you didn't do anything dangerous. No, I didn't. It was just like 5 feet down. But that gave me a little sense of what Colter Shaw would do. And I'm only telling you this story because I put into the book so much detail about survival skills, all of which are accurate. Now, I hope nobody gets into a situation where a reader gets into a situation where they, have to kick their way out of a car that's broken through the ice somewhere. I think I have that information in there, but let's hope they don't have to do that. But I just found that whole phenomenon of the survival world to be rather fascinating.
Well, it is fascinating, but I mean, a lot of these are skills that maybe 100 years ago people had a lot more routinely than people brought up today. So, if you were going west 150 years ago or something, you would have had to know how to do a lot of the things that Colter's father has taught him. But let's also remember that Colter does have siblings, so it'll be interesting to see to what degree his siblings have also absorbed these skills.
And I have books planned for, again, I mentioned I have so many ideas. And I should back up by saying at this age, I can do, obviously, certainly I'm going to do a book a year. There's no question about that. And probably 4 or 5 short stories a year. But last year I wrote 2 books. This year I'm writing 2 books at the same time. So I intend to have a Colter, Lincoln, and a standalone thrown in occasionally on that. So I just hope readers out there who like Colter will come to fall in love with him the way I fell in love with Travis McGee, John D. McDonald's wonderful character, or James Bond, or I think it was Harry Palmer. It was the Ipcress File, Len Dighton's great story, the Ipcress File. I don't think he had a name, the spy had a name in that book, but, and we've got Bourne, we love the series, Case Carpetta, we just love all these, or Tempest Brennan, Kathy Reich's wonderful Tempe character.
If you're going to have TV, it will certainly, I mean, you've been very fortunate in the film adaptations of your books so far, which certainly have impelled, Lincoln to propelled Lincoln to a lot of readers. So I think that if Disney indeed makes the Never game, that will bring you more fans to it. The one thing we're dancing around, and the thing I wish we could talk about, is there's just an unbelievably cool reason for what's going on in this book. And I'm not only fascinated by it, but appalled by it and terrified that it might actually be true. And I'm sorry we can't discuss it, but
I can say it.
It's one of your very best ideas.
Well, thank you. And it's something that's obsessed me for many years since I've been an attorney. And I will say, it is very difficult to talk about, but I'll say only this, that it is well, first of all, Samuel Goldwyn said, if you want to send a message, go to Western Union. Don't put it in his case, movie. Don't put it in your book, meaning don't get up on a soapbox and preach about something that you feel is a danger or a threat, but rather tell a story about the circumstances that have real human impact on what could happen. And there's a large overarching risk of threat in this book that, and I think, well, with legal backgrounds, we understand could have, it could have dramatic impact on political life in America. That's all I'll say about it. I won't say anything more. But it is not all that unreasonable. And I've been researching this for years, and wanted to work it into a book. And this is the perfect book to bring it to.
It is. It's your Dan Brown moment too, but we won't say any more than that. So Patrick, why don't we summon you back up, Ariel, from the deep, and tell us if there are any questions or comments that you've got, or questions you'd like.
Let's see here. Yes, there are a few questions. Well, I have a number of people that are asking, I'm sure you get asked this quite often, about the Bone Collector, about the film version of it, and what you thought of it, and what did you think of Denzel being cast as Lincoln Rhyme is one of the questions.
Sure. Well, I thought it was absolutely incredible. I'm one of the people who feel that books and movies are apples and oranges. And I'm going to belabor this metaphor a bit. And I grow really good apples. Okay. I'm a good apple grower, farmer, rancher, whatever you call it. My orchards are fine. Those are the books. I do not know how to make an orange to save my life. Those are the filmmakers. So we both got fruit. They're both, to take it out of the vegetarian motif for the moment, both are creative forms of entertainment, books and movies. But I don't get the language of films. I love films. I've been influenced by films, but I don't get the writing skills in crafting a script, and I also don't play well with others. So I didn't want to get involved in the making of The Bone Collector, the movie, The Bone Collector, the TV show on NBC, Dead Silence, my book, the movie based on A Maiden's Grave. I had Lifetime do a Devil's Teardrop TV thing. So I just didn't get involved in that. So I was delighted with it, but I just didn't really pay much attention to it. You know, I turned down a chance to go to the opening in New York and have dinner with Angelina Jolie. I mean, how's that? How's that for indifference? I was working on another book at the time.
Can you say a few words about your book, The Garden of Beasts?
Sure. My favorite book that I've written.
Favorite book?
Yeah, my favorite book. It is a book set in Berlin in 1936, in which Paul Schumann, a German-American who's working for a mob, an unnamed mob, and he's a hitman. They called them button men back then, a killer. But he only killed bad guys. He killed other mobsters, killed other murderers for his group. He was caught and given the option of either going to Sing Sing, the prison up on the Hudson, and being executed for murder, or going to Berlin under the guise of the 1936 Olympics and assassinating one of Hitler's main rearmament czars, a fictional character. And we knew then that Hitler was rearming. He was going to create a very strong and militant Germany. We probably did not know much about the pogroms, the Holocaust and so forth, and his racial ideas, but we knew he was up to no good. And so Paul goes over there to assassinate this guy, and to make a long story very short, Paul is a bad guy. He's a killer, and yet he has this one good side to him. The fellow, Reinhard Ernst, whom he is sent to assassinate, turns out to be a man who hates Hitler, hates the Nazi Empire, loves the German Republic, loves democracy, loves his grandchildren. And I put those two at loggerheads. And very briefly, the book came out of 9/11, actually. And I wanted to write about institutionalized evil. But I thought, fundamentalist religious terrorism was too close to us. Wordsworth said, poetry is emotion, but it's emotion recollected in tranquility. You have to let a long time pass. And I also didn't find 19 thugs taking over airplanes and blowing up and killing, innocent people to be any kind of grand scheme. It was just a petty act with terrible consequences. Hitler, however, was utterly nefarious. He was a genius, and he seduced an entire country with what he did. And that's what I wanted to write about.
There's an absolute wave of World War II stories. It's like an entire subgenre now of historical fiction. You really ought to push bringing back Garden of Beasts, because at the time you wrote it didn't have all of the interest in this whole sort of group of books that we have now. But I think it would be a terrific opportunity to.
Barbara, I have a sequel planned out, and that idea file I was telling you about.
Well, I think it's a fantastic, really a phenomenal book, and I'd love to see it get a lot of attention again. And I think right now is the time when that could happen. But prod your agent for me.
I will. I'll do some prodding. Thank you.
Maybe a nice trade paperback edition.
Yeah.
Trade paperback reissue.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm getting some interesting questions coming in here. David says, if Jeffery Deaver could have dinner with any author, who would it be, past and present?
Well, it's hard to have, when you ask, what's your favorite book? I would probably have to say John le Carré, who is one of my all-time favorite authors, not only for the stories he's crafted, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, for instance, but his style. He puts words together like no one else in the thriller genre. I mean, my favorite author, probably Saul Bellow, another great stylist, but he was so smart, Nobel laureate, and a genius, a University of Chicago professor, not with us anymore. I probably would be a bit intimidated, but I think John le Carré and I could sit in his parlor in Cornwall, which is where he lived, and have a sherry and just chat about politics and tradecraft. And he and I shared some political views about where American politics may have gone wrong in the last few decades. And I think we would have a great deal to commiserate about.
Have you ever listened to an interview with John le Carre?
I have heard some, yes.
Did you notice that he sounds just like Lee Child?
I did not know. I never made that connection.
Go back and listen again. I was really shocked when one of the ones made shortly before he died. It was a wonderful, I'm trying to remember if it was on the BBC or what, but anyway, it was terrific. But in his voice and his intonations and so forth, if I closed my eyes, I thought it was Lee.
Well, Barbara, speaking of his voice, yet not only is he a brilliant author, and he was a spy. I mean, he worked for MI6 at one point. Did some very good things for the United Kingdom, and not only that, but he was a very good-looking, distinguished British gentleman. And on top of that, if that's not irritating enough, he read his books on audio in English, French, and German, and that just knocked me on my socks, if that's the expression that one does with one sock. Wow. Anyway, I'm sorry, Patrick. So if we have any more questions here.
No, he read his own audiobooks and all
Yes.
three.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow. Did you ever get a chance to meet him?
No, I never did. I still have treasured somewhere a letter that he sent, and it was an actual letter. I edited an anthology for MWA called Ice Cold, and it was about a collection of short stories, number of authors, about espionage during the Cold War. And so we, of course, I was editor Raymond Benson, he and I both wrote the James Bond novels. We did not write together. We each wrote James Bond continuation novels. And so we wrote him, and he sent back, I had a connection through my agent in London. So I wrote him and got back a note that said, "Thank you so much. I would be delighted to, but time does not allow it." And I thought, oh, that's great. So I still have that treasured somewhere. It's probably in a copy of, I have a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I could not afford a first edition, UK first edition, because it was quite rare, but I think it's a second edition. So I probably have that tucked in there in my library.
Barbara, did you ever meet him?
Yeah, once. And I don't know if you remember this, but we had a customer whose name I am totally unable to remember, who said to us once that he would be happy to ask, if David Cornwall was actually John le Carre's real name, he would be happy to ask David Cornwall if he would like to sign books for us. And if you think back to it, because you were working at the store by then, we for several years were able to send books from London to Cornwall, and he would sign them and send them back. I have several. And my personal favorite is his memoir, because I was so stunned by how he wrote about his father, who was like the ultimate con man. He was a grifter deluxe, and not the parent you would have thought that a gentleman like John le Carre could have survived. But the thing that's remarkable about the way he wrote about his father is there was no bitterness, despite the fact that he didn't have any money. His father just ruined his family. And I admired that so much, that he was able to write about it with that degree of objectivity and even affection.
And his book, A Perfect Spy, is about his relationship with his father. And there's Ricky is the character, the father figure, utterly despicable. And it is the one of the most really insightful and yet devastating analyses of a father-son relationship I've ever read, told in le Carre's or Cornwall's inimitable style. And it's a tough book to read because it does echo that and echo his true relationship. And if I remember correctly, he'd been thinking about the book for years, but he could not write it until his father passed away.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of other questions. I mean, you always, I'm sure, get the obligatory Catherine Dance questions.
Yes.
What was it? 2015 was the last one, I think it was, Solitude Creek.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
A while ago. Well, I'll just, if any of you out there have heard my my discussion of writing commercial fiction, not literary fiction, but commercial fiction, I preface my remarks by saying it's a business. We create a product. It's a product we're very proud of. It's a wonderful product. I wake up every morning looking forward to creating more product. And after we get off our conversation, I will go back in my in the kitchen where I have a little office set up because it's near the food and the bar, and I will create a little more product. But it is a product, and that means we as manufacturers have to look at the market. And the reality is that given the amount of time I have to write, which is every day, maybe 6, 7, 8 hours a day, I can only do so much. And to be honest, the sales of Catherine, as much as I liked her, were not that good. People see the reviews were good, but they didn't sell well. And I'm not quite sure how to answer that, why that is. But the sales of Colter and of Lincoln and the standalones were much higher. So I have to devote myself to that. And if I were an author who wrote with other authors, and that's absolutely fine. Again, I don't play well with others. I would be happy to hand over some outline ideas and have them produce the book, but I just don't have the time to do it now. I have stories outlined, and if let's say a producer likes Catherine, out comes a TV series, the book sales go up again, I can shift my time to that. I will do so, but I have to be a little respectful of the hours of the day.
I have a few people asking about your dogs.
Oh.
How are they, and are they close by?
They are fine. Yeah, actually, Mom is asleep right now, so we're going to leave her asleep. I would have her children in here now, except they seem to be able to have this, I was going to say, transcendental ability to hear a squirrel 3 blocks away. And when they hear the squirrel could sneeze or could scratch its ear, if squirrels sneeze and scratch their ears, and they would be barking at the window. So at the moment, Monty and Blush are in the other room, locked away. Passion, however, their mama just sits here. And I won't mention they are Briards, Briard. It's a French herding dog. And I show them. I myself do not show them, but I have an employee who takes them to dog shows and runs around the ring. And we've done Westminster. Actually, Passion's daddy won breed at Westminster, if that means anything. The Westminster Dog Show. It's a big prestigious show in New York City. So, and Passion is herself a champion dog.
Great. Let's see. Bob asks, is it too soon, or are you considering using COVID in a thriller plot?
I will not do that for several reasons. Basically, the Wordsworth quote I mentioned earlier, poetry is emotion recollected in tranquility. We are way too close to this horrible phenomenon. And I actually, although I have many ideas, I cannot think of any possible idea that would be a unique departure from many other pandemic-oriented books. There have been some great ones. I think Lawrence Wright, if I have the name correct, if I think that's who it was, I know Lawrence Wright. I wrote an incredible novel that I think published last March. And then there've been other great books about pandemics, and it's not really my kind of thing. So in answer to the question, no, I probably will steer clear of that.
I'm going to look at Lawrence Wright, because he was kind enough to sign a big shipment for us, and it was our book of the month. And I'm going totally blank.
Didn't it have October in the title?
I think so. I'm just going to the end of October.
End of October, I think.
And I will, it's now out in paperback, and I would say that it is a truly, if you're interested at all in a book about a pandemic, that it is really a superb book. Lawrence Wright, The End of October.
It's gotten great notices.
Yeah, no, it was terrific. And he was lovely about signing it for us, and very nice man.
There's another one here. By the way, our friend Daniel Palmer is watching.
Oh, hey, Dan, how you doing?
There was a
May
question.
I just put I'm sorry, but may I put a plug in for is it The Perfect Daughter or A Perfect Daughter? Hold on a minute. The Perfect Daughter, a great book. So
Yeah. Here's a good question. Nicole says, will there be another compilation like Face Off featuring Colter Shaw? And who would he face off against?
oh, that's quite interesting. And for those of you who don't know, this was a project by well, Barbara, maybe you can help me out. Was it?
I think it was ITW.
ITW, you're right, not MWA. And it was a fundraiser. We didn't make any money on it, or at least I didn't. Maybe nobody told me that they made money and I didn't. But
No,
I
it's
think,
a fundraiser for the International Thriller Writers.
right, for ITW. I was joking a bit there, but it was a great idea. They put two authors together, and John Sanford and I, Lucas Davenport and Lincoln Rhyme, were together solving a crime. And I think, was it Lee Child and Michael Connolly? Anyway, Michael and, no, I think it was, oh my gosh, who was it? Anyway, Michael and somebody else, but it was a very clever idea. And I will say that those are great stories. They were extremely creative, and I loved the book. But that was done by the organization. An author would not come up with that idea. And what I would like to do is pair, let's see, Colter with I get, oh my gosh, it's hard to say. I would like to expand it to an international crowd, and maybe have Rebus, Ian Rankin's wonderful character in Colter Shaw. I could send Colter over to England to seek a reward, and he could use his, his fisticuffs, because I don't remember Rebus being a particularly physical kind of guy. I mean, you may.
And now he's old, and he has whatever. What is the name of that breathing?
Emphysema, or
No, it's cope. I can't remember what it is, but anyway, it's a problem we discussed with Ian when we launched his book here in October, is that Rebus has reached the point where his breathing problems are such that he had to move from an upstairs flat to a ground level flat. And
congestive heart failure.
no, it's not.
It's not?
No, I will come to me, whatever it's called. It's anyway. So you're right. And even though he wasn't terribly physical before, now he's too old or too ill to be. So he's more of a
COPD.
That's it. Thank you.
Everybody in the notes are saving us, or the comments.
Well, thank you.
That's the great thing about the note thing is
Yeah.
so we can't remember. But and also you wouldn't be going to England, Jeffrey. Be careful here. You'd have to go to Scotland.
Well, the UK, I meant to say, yes, of course.
Right, but still, and Rebus is part of Police Scotland, was part of.
Oh yeah, well, and actually, Ian Rankin is such a wonderful guy. When I was there on book tour in May several years ago, it happened to be my birthday, and I tour on my birthday all the time. I'm not sentimental about my birthday at all. I'm trying to forget them recently, to be honest with you. And so what happens, we're in the Edinburgh Public Library, easily 250 people there, and Ian, we're sitting in armchairs up on the dais there, and he and I are friends, so we're just having a pint and talking. He says, okay, let's get started, but before we do, he stands up and leads everybody singing happy birthday to me. And it was actually a very moving experience, I will say. And he's got one hell of a voice, I will add.
Yeah, well, he too is a musician, or that's an important part of his persona. So you guys have that in common. He's a wonderful guy. I couldn't agree with you more. Right. Any other questions there, Patrick?
Maybe, let's see, maybe a final couple here. Do you have a thought for, or any plans to do another James Bond book, or was that just a one-off?
I had a very good relationship with the Ian Fleming estate, the family. And for your viewers who aren't here, I was invited by the estate to write a James Bond book. Ian Fleming passed away at a young age in his 50s in the 1960s. And because the books were so popular, the estate wisely commissioned other authors to write continuation books. And they invited me, and I was just delighted to do it. And that became carte blanche about 10 years ago. We had a great relationship. And they asked me if I'd be interested in doing another one, but I was and I had a great time doing it. And I loved the Bond character. And I will say, don't expect the modern day Bond from the movies. My Bond was harkening back to the 1950s, the original Bond books, where he was a gritty, kind of a nihilistic character who was suave and debonair, he had good taste, but he also was convinced that he was going to die by the age he was 40. He lived very fast. Whenever he killed somebody, 00 meant he was an assassin. That didn't mean he was allowed to kill somebody in self-defense. That meant that he'd sneak up behind somebody and murder the Soviet spy or the other organized criminal. And then he would go into a funk, a depression for months afterwards. He was a real character. In the movies, they're kind of cartoonish. So anyway, that's who my character was, and it did well. But in the end of the day, I didn't own the copyright to it. I had to split the money. Did I mention this is a business? And so I decided we both decided to go our separate ways. They've hired other authors to do that, and we can always revisit it at some point.
Was the original Bond a World War II veteran?
Well, yes, and of all things, you mentioned that he was a naval officer stationed in Afghanistan during the Second World War. Well, my character was a veteran, served on the Royal Navy, Navy officer. This is in I didn't actually name the date, but it was like the 2000s, somewhere in the mid 2000s, probably 2020. And he had been a naval officer in Afghanistan and worked for there's the SBS, Special Boat Service, which is kind of the special ops outfit. And then very much like Bond did in the original series. So it was curiously parallel. I was very proud of the book. I know a lot of people liked it.
And a memorable evening, as we've earlier said.
It was indeed.
Is there a final question, Patrick?
Yeah, there are a few people that are asking, what are you reading at the moment? Is there anything that you'd recommend that you've enjoyed?
Well, I read, let me think, a couple things that I absolutely just love. Now, I will say most of my reading is research for my books. And I've just finished The Midnight Lock. That's the Lincoln Rhyme book about this very nefarious locksmith who can break through any lock. And I read a book called Open in 30 Seconds about breaking the Medeco lock. And Medeco, MEDECO lock, which is kind of state-of-the-art lock. And I'm not talking about Nest and electric locks. Those are something entirely different. The real lock pickers look at the metal thing, the disc, the pin and tumbler locks, and they have to break through that. And it's almost a mystical kind of art. I think it's called, I think I may have gathered this, but I call lock picking the dark side of Zen, because these people try to become one with the lock. So anyway, that was a great book. But in terms of fiction, I read Girl A by Abigail Dean, Elsewhere by Dean Koontz, absolutely wonderful books. Then he did a series of short stories, and the name escapes me now, but he's such a wonderful, prolific writer. I turn around, he's got a new book out. I mean, turn around, give him 1 week and he's got another book out.
He is indeed wonderful. We've been very lucky that we get to have conversations with him now for all of his books. So it's been a treat. He's a great correspondent too. So we began this by talking about Jeffrey's honors in the United States, but I didn't mention that he is published in over 150 countries, and the English absolutely love his work. He's been nominated for, I can't even remember how many Ian Fleming Steel Daggers for Best Thriller, and innumerable short story awards, and probably, all kinds of other countries have also nominated him for his work. So he's truly a global author, and we're privileged to be able to talk to him as often as we do. So Jeffrey, we will look forward to November. We'll have to talk about it, hopefully in person. And thank you so much for sharing your book launch tonight for The Final Twist with us. Much appreciated. We do have autographed copies on their way. They'll probably be in by Friday. And this really it's a terrific book, not just a great story with interesting characters, but a really thought-provoking book that fits into the current, either reality or unreality, whichever way you want to look at what's going on in America today. When I open the newspaper anymore in the morning, I say to Rap, I feel like I'm walking into an alternate reality where I have trouble figuring out what's real and what isn't, especially here in Arizona at the moment. Anyway, Jeffrey, thank you so much. Thank you all for watching us this evening, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Well, Barbara, thank you so much. Patrick, thank you so much. It is always a pure pleasure to visit with you, Barbara. And we're going to make that work in November, one way or the other.
Wonderful. We certainly will. All right, dear.
Goodbye to all the viewers too. Thank you for watching.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.